Welcome my fellow night security guards to the Triple S Variety channel. In this video I will be reviewing and highlighting everything I thought to be important, interesting or noteworthy from the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. And I just want to point out before we start that while I am quite knowledgeable of FNAF lore, I am not entirely knowledgeable. I haven't played all of the games, mainly because I don't own any VR equipment, and I haven't read all of the books, though I have watched and listened to people play and talk about those games and books on YouTube. And having seen the movie, it does seem to mainly pull from the games, obviously, but also the Silver Eyes trilogy of books, so it will be those that I'll mainly be referencing and comparing the movie to, with also the occasional reference to the Fazbear Fright books as well. Now, with that said, let's begin. Point number 1, apparently the security guard in this cold open was supposed to actually be played by Markiplier, but he couldn't due to scheduling conflicts, and if they kept it the same, where the guard had no lines, I wouldn't have minded if Markiplier had been the guard. That's nothing against Markiplier's voice or anything, it's just going into this movie I had hoped it wouldn't reference the pop culture surrounding the FNAF series. Unfortunately though, it does later on, but we'll get there when we get there. Point number 2, I wonder why this kid's face, the one I presume is the kid who possesses Golden Freddy, has their head drawn over the top of a piece of paper that's been stuck onto the paper. Is there something hidden under that paper? Could this have something to do with Cassidy / Golden Freddy being a bit different or the other kid spirits and possessed animatronics? Or could it be referencing the Golden Duo theory, a theory that posits that Golden Freddy isn't just possessed by one child but two, Cassidy and the Crying Child, a belief many have come to due to the Stitch Wraith, an animatronic character from the epilogues of the Fazbear Fright books, being possessed by two children, Jake, who is a parallel to the Crying Child as both died due to brain-related issues, and Andrew, who is a parallel to Cassidy as both were victims of William Afton, and also due to the FNAF survival logbook, which seems to be trying to solve who is possessing Golden Freddy by implying the logbook itself is possessed by two spirits, one who writes in faded text and one who changes the actual text of the book to talk to each other and the reader. Point number 3, I love the use of the 8-bit style to show the missing children's incident victims being led off by Spring Bonnie to be murdered, since we learn so much about the various murders and such via the 8-bit minigames throughout the FNAF games. Point number 4, and already the movie seems to be diverging from the games. In Ultimate Custom Night, with the Chica reveals,
I was the first. I have seen everything.
And yet here we see Fritz is the first to be led off and murdered by William Afton and will go on to possess Foxy. Next is Gabriel, who goes on to possess Freddy, then Susie, who goes on to possess Chica, then Cassidy, who goes on to possess Golden Freddy, and finally Jeremy, who goes on to possess Bonnie. And yes, I'm going with the game names for the missing children for this video, even though Cassidy is a girl in both the games and the original book trilogy, because I think it would be more confusing if this kid who possesses Golden Freddy was also called Michael. Anyways, this is a bit of a weird murder order if you ask me. I mean, it changes Susie from being the first of the victims who goes on to possess one of the 4 core animatronics to being the third, but also that Cassidy isn't the last of the children to be murdered, which I feel would have made more sense if after killing Susie, Fritz, Gabriel and Jeremy and stuffing them into Chica, Foxy, Freddy and Bonnie respectively, and then proceeding to kill the 5th child Cassidy, William Afton would have had nowhere left to hide the body except in the counterpart to Spring Bonnie, which is Golden Freddy, which in my opinion would then explain why Cassidy / Golden Freddy appears to be the leader of the animatronics. Cassidy would have had to have dealt with losing all of his friends one by one, and now possessing the counterpart to Spring Bonnie, he has put himself in the position as being the rival to theirs and his murderer, William Afton. Point number 4.5. So I noticed something pretty cool whilst editing this video that I didn't catch when I was writing my scripts or before I recorded it, so I'm adding this point here in post. I noticed during this 8-bit murder montage sequence that Matthew Lillard's name is on the screen at the same time as when it shows William Afton suiting up as Spring Bonnie, and Matthew's name cycles through several colours but then stays purple. A nice little attention to detail there by the editors, bravo. Point number 5, dream theory, a reference to the theory that all of FNAF lore is happening inside the coma dream of the character known as the Crying Child who got bit by Golden Freddy in the 8-bit minigames. And also maybe even the 3 previous games were also dreams had by the Crying Child. I also like how instead of being like a Penguin Books logo with a, penguin, it's instead actually a bunny. Point number 6, oh hey, that backpack thing kind of looks like Bonnie. Point number 7, and there's a Chico's Magic Rainbow from FNAF World. Point number 8, and the woman working at this ice cream place is called Cindy, which could be a reference to the character of Cindy from the popular Five Nights at Freddy's fan game, Five Nights at Candy's. Point number 9, quite fitting at William Afton, Steve Raglan, has a rabbit's foot, considering, We interrupt this Triple S Variety Channel video to bring you this important message. Have you remembered to carry out the 3 S's? S number 1, subscribe to the Triple S Variety Channel. S number 2, smash that like button. And S number 3, share this video with friends, family, and relevant communities. We now return you to your Triple S Variety Channel video already in progress. Point number 10, Max, my woman in Christ, look at your fingers. How many rings do you need? Might as well call you Shang-Chi. Point number 11, oh my god, there he is. The best character in the entire movie with his 1,000-yard stare, Doug. Everyone loves Doug, and I hope he reappears somehow in the sequels. Point number 12, did you guys notice the words on the board in this scene? The ones that stand out to me the most are Puppet, Junior, Heart, Bear, Bunny, Fox, and Chick. Point number 13, wait, what? William Afton is giving instructions to the new security guard over the phone? Was MatPat right the whole time? Are William Afton and Phone Guy one and the same?
See you on the flip side.
Catch you on the flip side.
Point number 14. Outside of the security room on the wall, you can see a board of employees of the month. A bunch of these are apparently actually YouTubers, but I only recognise Dorco for the month of July. Point number 15. Ah, yeah, that makes sense, Mike. Whack the TV to fix the tape glitching out in the VCR. Smart. Point number 16. Of course, they put Balloon Boy next to a torch. Yes, I am British. What with his ability to disable your torch in FNAF 2. Point number 17. Oh, hey, look, it's Luke Skywalker from the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Point number 18. The name of this diner, Sparky's, is a reference to the hoax that in the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, there was a hidden animatronic called Sparky the dog who would appear backstage. And funnily enough, later on in the movie, we can actually see an animatronic dog in the backstage of Freddy Fazbear's. Point number 19. Speaking of MatPat, here's the theory man himself. First off, notice the name on his tag, Ness. This is either a reference to Ness, who is believed to be Vanessa from the FNAF AR special delivery emails, or to the main character of one of MatPat's favourite game series, Ness from Earthbound. Thing is though, you can't think of MatPat and Ness at the same time without also thinking of MatPat's controversial theory video Sans is Ness. And MatPat's cameo in this movie is controversial for me because he drops his catchphrase,
"It's just a theory."
I'm not gonna lie to you folks, hearing this made me cringe so hard in my seat at the cinema. Again, I would have preferred if the FNAF movie had remained completely detached from the pop culture surrounding the series, but I also wasn't a fan of Matt's delivery of the line. He enunciates it like he's saying it at the end of one of his videos,
Just a theory.
whereas I would have preferred it if he said it more naturally and casually, but that's just me. Point number 20, I can't believe Jane just wants custody of Abby to get the custody money like Mike believes, because it really doesn't seem like she's struggling for money. Saying that though, it could be maybe that she needs the extra money because she has gambling debts, or she's lost a lot of money from investing badly in crypto, or she owes some very bad people and only has a week to pay up or they break her legs. Who knows? Point number 21, with Mike saying he just now wants to know what the kids saw, and then this close-up behind shot, I really thought Susie was going to say something akin to the Ultimate Custom Night with a cheekered line,
I was the first. I have seen everything.
Point number 22, Fritz crying black tears reminds me of the sprites for the dead kids we see in several of the FNAF games. It also reminds me of how people killed by the Stitch Wraith in the Fazbear Frights epilogues would cry black tears, but I can't see how that has any connection to Fritz here. Point number 23, we see the words "It's me" written in the dust on this mirror, and that's a phrase typically attributed to Golden Freddy attempting to get across their real identity to others, especially Mike, as it is widely believed Golden Freddy actually contains 2 souls within it, Cassidy and also Crying Child, who is believed to be Michael Afton's younger brother. However, "It's me" has also appeared on multiple other occasions when Golden Freddy wasn't around, so who's to say this instance of it is actually connected to Cassidy/Golden Freddy? I think it would actually make more sense that the spirit of Mike's murdered brother Garrett is somewhere in the pizzeria and is reaching out to Mike via this message. Though I wouldn't go as far to say Garrett's spirit is possessing the little balloon boy toy, as I have seen others theorise. Point number 24, and here we meet Police Officer Vanessa Shelley, which is interesting as one of the newest characters that has been incredibly important in the games is the character of Vanessa, with her first major appearance being in Security Breach, released in 2021. In Security Breach, Vanessa isn't a police officer, but instead a security guard, and appears to also be the bunny costume wearing Vanny, who is intent on killing the main character, Gregory. Another difference is rather than her last name being Shelley, like in the movie, her surname apparently starts with the letter A, leading many to believe she is in some way related to William Afton, most likely as his daughter. And wouldn't you know it, Vanessa later on in the movie reveals William Afton is her father, which probably got a lot of theorisers' head spinning when that bombshell reveal was dropped. Since in the games it appears so far we seemingly only really know of 3 of William's kids, Michael, Elizabeth and Crying Child. That's not his actual name, it's just his real name has never been revealed, unless you believe he's called Evan. And yes, Michael, the Michael of this movie, in the games, is believed to have assumed the surname Schmidt and was the main character of the first FNAF game, and people theorise he also took on the names of Jeremy Fitzgerald and maybe even Fritz Smith, who are the security guards you play as in FNAF 2. Circling back around to Vanessa, an apparent official plot synopsis of the FNAF movie Blumhouse sent out as part of some marketing survey, Vanessa's original surname was actually Monroe until being changed to Shelley for some unknown reason. Point at number 25, if you look in the background here, you might notice just a random endoskeleton standing in the shadows. According to Dorco, this animatronic was called Tina and is hidden throughout the movie, though I've only seen it one other time during Mike's cleanup of the building. Did you guys see Tina anywhere else? Let me know in the comments. Point number 26, well, would you look at Carl's shirt? Guess he's a fan of Midnight Motorist. Probably has the high score. Point number 27, makes sense Carl gets killed by the cupcake since Carl is the name fans gave to the cupcake. Point number 28, actually, let's stop for a moment to talk about the cupcake. Despite there being only 5 victims going on to possess Golden Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy, it really does seem like Mr. Cupcake is also possessed. Could it be that since Mr. Cupcake and Chica are so closely connected that they both share the soul of Susie? Or could it be that Mr. Cupcake is possessed by the spirit of the dog Susie had in both the games and the original book trilogy, which was hit by a car, possibly William Afton's car? I mean, Mr. Cupcake does act like Chica's attack dog throughout this movie. And when we see William going up to Susie to lead her away, he's waving his arms about as if he's in a panic, freaking out and telling Susie, "Your dog isn't dead, he's alive. Quick, come with me, I'll take you to it." Point number 29, Hank's screams are top tier. Had the whole cinema laughing. I love them. Point number 30, I wonder why it is that Max can see the spirits of the children. Or saying that, maybe it's the opposite, and I wonder why the children chose to show themselves to Max. Point number 31, okay, I was expecting to see something pop up in Freddy's mouth, either the face of Gabriel or a hand, which is what happened in the movie, but I wasn't expecting to see Max get chomped in half. Those animatronic jaws are insanely powerful, like a gator's. Point number 32, so Mike Schmidt in this movie is pretty darn similar to the character of Charlotte Emily in the original book trilogy. Charlotte Emily had a brother named Sammy who she believed had been taken by a yellow bunny whilst they were playing in a Freddy's restaurant. And while Charlotte's mother didn't die but instead just left, her father Henry did also die by chop suey. I wonder though if any movie sequels will go with what actually happened to Charlie in the books and transplant it onto Mike, where it wasn't actually Sammy who was taken by William Afton, but Charlie herself. Henry then ended up bringing one of Charlie's dolls called Ella to life by grieving over it for months, and then proceeded to teach it how to be Charlie. Meanwhile, Charlie's mother couldn't handle the stuff Henry was doing in trying to recreate their dead daughter, and left with Sammy. Henry then created 3 robot versions of Charlie to represent various stages of her life, toddler, child and teen, but whilst creating the adult version he realised he'd become a madman and ended up pouring his anger into the adult robot Charlie. William Afton then stole the unfinished adult Charlie robot and finished her, turning her into Circus Baby, who ended up killing William's daughter Elizabeth and whose spirit possessed Baby, merging the personality of Elizabeth together with the memories of Charlie. Henry stole Baby back off William and locked her in one of the closets in Charlie's room, then had an animatronics endoskeleton stab him to death. No idea if they'll go with that plot thread for the movie sequel since it's pretty convoluted, but who knows, maybe they could pull it off. Point number 33, another Balloon Boy jump scare, but this time the little creep literally appears out of nowhere. He wasn't on the shelf when Mike first goes into the janitorial room. And I'll actually bring up a thought I had from when I watched the movie now. It doesn't seem like it's just the animatronics that are possessed, but the building itself as well. We see a few times that doors just randomly close and open on their own, and the building starts wrecking itself when William gets spring locked. Maybe the spirit doing this is also the one controlling Balloon Boy, and maybe, just maybe, it might be Garrett. So I guess I do kind of believe Balloon Boy is Garrett. Damn it. But anyway, this could mean as well that the "It's Me" written on the mirror wasn't Cassidy/Golden Freddy or just an Easter egg, but actually Garrett trying to talk to Mike. Point number 34, this springlock suit, which horrifyingly looks like it was meant to be worn by a child due to its size, looks a hell of a lot like Ella, their doll from the graphic novels of the original book trilogy, and also from the cover of the 3rd Fazbear Frights book, 1:35 AM. It also looks a lot like Baby from Sister Location, which is fitting since Abby is almost later forced into the suit, and Abby is an anagram of baby. Point number 35, this is the second time the faces of the kids have become blurry. The first was during the dream Mike has before he meets Vanessa, where Jeremy and Gabriel's faces go blurry, and then this time it happens to Fritz and Susie. I wonder if it's just down to this being a dream, or could it maybe hold more significance in some way? I don't know. Point number 36, so after being bifurcated by Freddy, Max was stuffed inside what appears to be Shadow Freddy, the mysterious purple version of Freddy that has appeared throughout the series in supernatural ways. We also see Carl and Max's brother Jeff, but where's Hank? Well, it appears Hank might have been stuffed into Sparky, since it appears as a broken arm coming out of Sparky's suit. Point number 37, and here we finally get to see Golden Freddy. more yellow and banged up than regular Freddy, but I guess that wasn't enough for most people to not get the two confused. I mean, if you've been paying attention to the movie, then you should have already been wondering, wait, if these 4 kids are supposed to be Bonnie, Foxy, Freddy and Chica, then who's this blonde boy that's done all the talking supposed to be? I mean, the movie even spells it out by having Cassidy say he isn't Freddy to Abby, but people still didn't realise and thought the animatronic only looked like that because it was outside the restaurant for some reason. Point number 38, is Jane dead? Did Golden Freddy knock her out? Did she faint? Find out next time on Freddy Ball Z. Point number 39, so the taxi driver is played by YouTuber Corey Kenshin, who I've never watched or heard of before outside of the Act Man covering Corey's video about YouTube favoritism. So it was nowhere near as jarring to see him in this movie as it was to see MatPat, especially because if Corey dropped a catchphrase of his, I wouldn't have picked up on it. Point number 40, Vanessa saying that William murdered the kids but they don't remember connects to the original book trilogy where it's William who reveals that the dead do forget, which is why they've never tried to murder him whilst in the spring Bonnie suit. Point number 41, I find it so incredibly ghoulish that William murdered Garrett and gave his toy plane to Vanessa. Really just ugh. Point number 42.
Electricity is the key.
I thought memory was the key. Oh, yeah, and the sword. Sword is key too. Caboose, shut up!
Point number 43. Abby hiding behind arcade cabinets from Foxy is just like when Charlie did the same thing in the original book trilogy, and then she hides in the ball pit, just like Oswald did in the Fazbear Fright story Into the Pit. Point number 44. William's entrance in his spring Bonnie suit is really chilling with the angle of his body, and the suit also appears to have at one point been burnt on its right side. I wonder what that's all about. Point number 45. I love how from this angle all you can see is the pristine side of spring Bonnie, which then ends up scarred when Vanessa shoots him in the heart area. Really, though, she should have gone for the head. Point number 46, is it just me, or does this shot of Mike after he flips the switch seem like it was actually taken from when he was trapped to the chair and about to get the Freddy head put on him? Point number 47, they also flipped this shot of William. Notice the burn marks go from being on the right of the suit to being on the left. Point number 48, this whole scene of Abby drawing William murdering the children and William getting spring-locked and being dragged off by the animatronics is a combination of the endings of the Silver Eyes and the Fourth Closet. It's in the Fourth Closet that Carlton gets the children possessing the animatronics to remember who murdered them by drawing a red-eyed spring Bonnie with blood dripping from its mouth. And it's in the Silver Eyes that Charlie triggers the spring locks and the animatronics drag spring Bonnie away. Point number 49, while it is awesome we get to hear William's famous line,
I always come back.
I agree with Id's fantasy that the line needed a bit more of a build-up to it so that it made more sense to those not familiar with why William says it in the games. Point number 50, spring Bonnie now turns Springtrap. Twitching here is reminiscent of his twitching in the FNAF 3 teaser trailer and after being springlocked in the 8-bit minigame from FNAF 3. Point number 51, according to MatPat, Corey was originally going to drop the one F-bomb allowed for PG-13 movies here when he gets jump-scared by Balloon Boy, who can somehow knock and open and close a car door. Seriously, what the heck is up with Balloon Boy? Point number 52, many of you probably missed this, I know I did since I left the cinema after the Corey and Balloon Boy scene, but right at the end of the credits, a music box type jingle starts to play and the robotic voice from the FNAF 2 8-bit minigame spells out the words, "Come find me." Possible hint that the puppet will appear in the next movie? To round all this off, my most disliked part of the movie goes to the MatPat cameo. Again, nothing against the man himself, but I just would have preferred if the movie had been completely detached from the pop culture surrounding the FNAF series. And my most liked part of the movie goes to all the practical effects. I am a sucker for practical over CGI, it just elevates a movie or TV show so much in my opinion. That's why I love the 2005 Doom movie so much, even though it's more of a Resident Evil movie than a Doom movie. I really enjoyed this movie. I wouldn't say it was a great movie, I liked the first half more than the last half, but it was a good movie, and as a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's, it was a blast to watch and I can't wait for the sequel. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Triple S Variety channel. Don't forget to do the 3 S's, and also why not leave a comment below pointing out anything I missed but you noticed. I would love to hear from you all. I've been Triple S, you've all been amazing, and I shall see you all in the next video.